Welcome to goRIA, the live stream. This week we have with us Corey Whalen from Bridgemark Strategies. And we're talking to Corey today about the podcast that he and I recorded just a few days ago, and it's currently up on the goRIA site today. Corey, good to see you again. It feels like it's been only days since we've last met.
It felt like an eternity. It's good to see you again, Chuck.
Likewise. All right. So, Corey, here's what we do on these live streams. We basically, tell the audience what's new at goRIA. So we're constantly putting on new content, all of which, of course, is laser focused on delivering information to advisors that are looking to get into the RIA space. So this past week, you and I sat down, recorded a podcast, a good 30, 35 minutes on one of my favorite topics, right? Tuck or no tuck. Should you build your own RIA or should you tuck into an existing one? So for those of you listening, we have our new QR code, which is pretty cool. We're very excited about that. You should hopefully be able to see that on the screen. If you just go to that QR code, it will bring you right to that goRIA site. If you're not good with QR codes, you can get there very easily by going to investmentnews.com. On the upper right-hand side, you'll see a little tab that says goRIA. Click that, and you'll see this podcast that Corey's going to tell us about in just a moment, as well as a bunch of other great content, podcasts with Hamburger from Market Council, Tim Walsh from talking about tech needs for the RIA, webcasts, a lot of good content. But today we're going to talk about the one that Corey and I just did. So, Corey, what do you think were some of the real highlight takeaways from that podcast that we did recently?
Yeah, Chuck. I mean, in terms of, tuck versus no tuck, I think the big theme was there's no absolute answers to this, right? It very much comes down to personal preference. And there's a very wide spectrum of options on one side, truly ultimate flexibility and control, building everything yourself and completely controlling your client experience and basically building your race car from the ground up, building your technology stack, your CRM, your trading tools, picking your custodian, handling all of your own compliance and having ultimate flexibility there. And then on the other side of the spectrum, just having ultimate convenience where you're plugging into an existing RIA, a tech stack is already selected for you. Someone else is handling the compliance, they're handling the business. So you can still have quite a bit of flexibility and control, yet just focus on serving your clients and taking some of the non-revenue generating activities off of your plate and putting them on somebody else's. And there's a million different options in the middle of that spectrum, and just talking about some of the questions that you should be asking yourself and some of the things that you could be considering to figure out where you fall in that spectrum.
Absolutely. And again, during the podcast, we take all of this and really unpack it into a great deal of detail. But one of the big takeaways for me was the idea of looking at, yourself. Are you an entrepreneur or an intrapreneur? And I know, Corey, we talked about this. So I myself consider myself to be very entrepreneurial. I love building processes. I love building businesses. So for me, building an RIA was the way to go. But what's nice about the RIA space, and we talked about this in the podcast, is that there's so many RIAs out there, right? If you're looking at wirehouses, there's probably 4 or 5. If you're looking at independent broker dealers, there's probably a dozen. But if you're looking at the RIA space, there's hundreds. So there's a real good chance, if you're really not as entrepreneurial or don't want the hassles of building everything from scratch, with 200 or 300 good RIAs to choose from, I think, Corey, you were mentioning that you guys represent like 150. You could probably find one, if you will, right off the rack that would have a very similar investment lineup and technology and compliance culture, very similar to what you would build, right? So tucking in, if you are not entrepreneurial, but you can still be an entrepreneur, meaning be very entrepreneurial within an enterprise, probably a good chance you could do that in the RIA space, perhaps better in the more limited broker-dealer world. Maybe speak to that just a little bit.
No, I definitely agree with you. And something else that we talked about on the podcast is it can be a multiple step process to make a move to where you want to go. I think the RIA world is very, very alien to a lot of financial advisors. And I think a lot of people can benefit from making a move to an already existing RIA where they handle the compliance, they handle the tech stack. Typically plugging into an RIA that has billions of dollars of assets adds a lot of scale, tools, and capabilities that someone couldn't afford to build inside of their organization. If they were opening up their own RIA, they can stay there for a couple years, really learn the ropes of the RIA channel, build their practice to the critical mass where it really makes sense to open up their own RIA, and then make a transition to their own RIA very, very seamlessly. The transition is not as hard as it is making a move from a broker dealer to an RIA as it is from RIA to RIA in 99% of cases.
Yeah, that's a great point that you brought up then and bring up again now, where it's not necessarily binary, right? It doesn't have to be tuck or no tuck. It could be tuck in for now, get your sea legs, and then go off on your own. Happens all the time. But one thing I'll bring up, and we talk about this a lot as well on the podcast, be careful. Read those contracts. Make sure there are no, handcuffs, golden or lead or whatever color they might be. And there was one, and I'll save some things for the podcast that we talked about, that was a surprisingly hidden handcuff that we ran into firsthand at Sovereign, right? There was someone that wanted to join us. They were with an RIA. They thought they did not have the handcuffs, but in fact they did. So that's a little teaser for the podcast. If you want the details, you'll have to listen to the whole thing. But I tell you, it's a lot of good stuff was covered during this. And again, if you're looking to go RIA, the first decision really is build your own or tuck in. The good news is there's great resources if you want to build your own. There are great resources if you want to tuck in. So it really is more what you want to do. How much do you want to be involved in, rolling up your sleeves to get it built, and economics too, right? We touched upon that. The economics for a 20 million AUM advisor is going to be different than the economics for a $500 million AUM advisor. We discussed that. So a lot of good content in this past episode. So Corey, I appreciate you taking the time today to talk about that, as well as the time for the podcast itself. But maybe a couple parting thoughts before we call it a day for today's live stream.
Yeah, I would just say if you're considering making a move to an RIA or any firm out there in the industry, just have an open mind during your due diligence process. Very rarely when I have an initial conversation with a financial advisor is their wish list of must-haves complete. And as they continue to go through the due diligence process of building their own RIA versus plugging in, those wants and needs and things they stay away from, they really evolve over time after every single call once they start to see the different tools, the different capabilities. So don't have any really strong opinions in the beginning. Have a conversation with a few firms about opening up your own RIA, have a few and plug in, and build your own opinions from there. But just have an open mind through the process.
Makes a ton of sense. All right, Corey, thanks again for joining us today and for that podcast. For those of you watching, you could use this QR code or just simply go to investmentnews.com. In the upper right-hand side, there's a tab. It says Go RIA. Click that. You'll see Corey's podcast. You'll see, I think we have about a dozen podcasts up there, a couple of replays from webinars, and there's a lot more content coming in. So we'll be doing these live streams every week with the intent of giving you an update on what's currently in Go RIA. And one last thing I'll reference, just kind of on a looking forward basis, is for the FPA, Financial Planning Association, we're taking Go RIA on the road. So I will be at the FPA National Conference in Phoenix. I think it's September 26th, 27th. And if you're going to be there, look for us. The Go RIA booth will be in the podcast alley, and we'll be looking for content. So if you want your 15 minutes of fame, come see me. We'll get you on the podcast. We're looking for any kind of stories that would be relevant to someone going RIA. So maybe you've already gone RIA. You want to share the good, the bad, and the ugly. That always plays well. Or you're thinking about going RIA. We could do a quick little podcast on what's your thought process behind it. And the other thing I would say too, and I'm a big fan of the FPA. I'm on the board here in Connecticut. It's a fantastic resource for connecting you with other advisors. And I would say one of the best ways to do your due diligence on going RIA, should you build your own, should you tuck in, talk to other advisors that have already done it, right? They will tell you where all the bodies are buried in either scenario. So that's a great resource. So if you're going to be at the FPA National, come find us. We'd love to get you on here for the live stream or one of the podcasts, perhaps. And that's it. Corey, again, thanks for joining us. And we'll see you all next Wednesday for a live stream with some more new content to talk about at goRIA. See you then. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey.